Hello and welcome back to Speed Demon Painting. Today we're taking a look at how to get started with the crown in Dystopian Wars with a suggestion of what to build, what to buy to help new players start out with this faction. Before we start off with it though, I would like to apologize to my subscribers because I've caught a bit of a throat bug for the last 2 weeks, which has completely shattered my voice, but it's on the mend now, it's starting to get better and I can go back to recording videos as per usual. Now, before we get into what you can buy to start with the crown, let's first get into why you would want to start with the crown anyway. Well, the crown is a very traditional naval force. You will not find too many esoteric units within this army, so if you like the idea of just fielding lots of more or less normal ships, then the crown is the faction for you. Also, it is a faction where you make mostly use of the traditional weapons, gun batteries, rocket batteries and torpedoes, so if you don't like memorizing a bunch of different stats for weapons, this traditional aspect of them really can be beneficial for you. It is a faction that also prefers to play defensively rather than offensively, which means that they are incredibly tanky, and that is largely because they use guardian generators instead of shield generators. These guardian generators, they form this type of network where you power up your shields. You get a resource called guardian points, and you can then spend that one to reduce enemy attacks of your choosing. So they're not static shield generators like other factions will. This is a very interesting extra little resource management thing, and that can be very powerful to deny your opponent his major attacks. This is generally what the crown does best all over. They've got a lot of different ways to counter the enemy plans, making their own ships come out on top, not so much because they are that strong on their own, mostly because you're just screwing over your opponent's plans. Now, if you want to consider buying this force, your best starting point is the new 2-player starter set that was released this month, called Sturginium Skies. You get a massive amount of models for the money that you're investing even if you're not using that Imperium half of it. The amount of models that you find in this 2-player starter set is so enormous that it's a great starting point even if you just sit on those models. Especially because you can easily make up a starting 1000 point army or a fleet that you can very easily expand upon. Now you have to know this game is standardized around 1500 to a max of 2000 points, and beginning games are best to start off at 1000 points to begin with, so this is just perfect straight off the bat. Also, if you go this route, you are immediately set up with all of the dice, rulers, your card decks. The new physical rulebook is included in it as well. You can always download them, of course, from the Warcradle website, but I find it quite nice to have these days. And if you don't want to find anyone to buy that German half off of you, you do have that neat little additional fleet if somebody is interested in that game in Dystopian Wars and can just be used as a demo fleet to go with. Now, I personally got mine at a Dutch webshop called ccgwinkel.nl. They've got an amazing deal going for it, because I think you pay just 85 euros for this set, and I've linked their website down below for people who are in mainland Europe and have a hard time finding these sets. He is based in Holland, but he can send out to pretty much all over the place, and yeah, he's an official Warcradle distributor, so if you have difficulties getting your hands on any of the pre-orders and everything, definitely check out his website and make sure to send him an email, because he is a bit not up to date with all of the stuff he has in stock, and just sending him an email and asking Michael if he can get that is probably your best course of action. Now, provided that you are a completely new player and you've picked up this set to get into the crown, you do have to have certain builds that you have to make with this set in order for it to work in game. First of all, you have to build 2 of the Canadian sprues as Toronto class models. Why? Torontos are a squadron of 2 and they operate as a flagship for a crown fleet. They do not have an own theme fleet, so you pretty much have to use the generic crown fleet to go along with it, but this is not necessarily a bad thing for you. However, it does come with a few limitations, such as a limitation to the number of flying units and submarine units that you can field. So legally fielding every single model in that box in a pickup game is not possible straight from the bat. But it doesn't matter because you get them so easily and you can expand on it so easily. That really doesn't take a lot, as we'll see later down this video. Also, that leaves you with 1/3 cruiser for the Canadian sprues as a leftover that you can do pretty much what you want to do with, whatever you want. However, I do recommend personally to build it as a Halifax shield cruiser. It is a great combo with all of the other Guardian generators that you get and that you can get into the future. If you only want to hear more about this, do check out a bit later down in the video when I talk about the expansion bits. Building the rest of the models is luckily very straightforward, as they only have one build option to begin with. Just as a word of advice for new players, never glue those turrets down. You can magnetize them easily if you know how to, and even if you don't, they come with these handy little peg and hole systems that you can just slot them in. And if you run off to your local pound shop and get some blue tack or poster tack, that's more than enough to hold it in place permanently so it doesn't fall around, even if you magnetize the bottom for transport, so very easy to do. I've already talked about the fact that you can't just field all of your all your models at once if you're playing a sort of a matched style play. Again, if you're playing that box as the narrative campaign that comes in it, there's no issues whatsoever. You can just use whatever you want in there. But for matched plays, there are a few things that you want to take into account as a new player, which is why this video is made. And why is that not a big deal? Well, because of just how many models you get in that fleet box. An example fleet list here is made. If you take your 2 Toronto control cruisers, they set you back 300 points. If you take that Halifax shield cruiser that I suggested to build more generator points, you're at 135 for that one. If you just slap in your squadron of Orca Hunter submarines, those 6 of them will set you back just under 200 points. And if you then take the 3 Prydain War Rotors, the main battle unit in that box, that comes in at 360 points. I do recommend putting the heavy gun batteries on there as a first one, because the rocket batteries that you standard put on them, you don't want to overdo it too much with those. Because they cannot target submarine units. So should you ever play opponents that do not have a lot of flying units like the opposing force in this box set, you're sort of out of luck if you go for too many rockets, because you can't target submarines with those. All of that considered brings you up to a nice little 993 point fleet, which is perfect for your initial 1000 point games. Inexperienced players usually take up to 3 hours to finish that first 1000 point game, because you're always looking up at the different stats and everything. Once you get more experience, you will knock these sort of games out in under 2 hours. But as a starter, I would not go above that one. So not being able to field all your models at once isn't that big a deal, because I don't recommend that to new players anyway. Now, you're obviously going to want to field more of those toys that you get in this box as time progresses, so you want to go and expand your fleet, obviously. And I decided to split this up into what is available right now, what you can get, and what is going to be coming very soon, talking about less than half a year from now. Well, the easiest way, I think, to expand this starter set is to just get a British frontline squadron. Why? This frontline squadron is able to make a Sabre class, which is again one of those units where you can have 2 of them working together and operating as a flagship unit for your force. You want to get another battle fleet in there, and they have to be led by a flagship. So all of the expansions that you want to get are all aimed at get more flagships, get more flagships, get more flagships, and then you can start building the rest of those units in. And the great news about it is, as soon as you bought that box, which sets you back under 30 euros, you are instantly able to build a 1500 points list, which I will show you in the next one. Also, if you've bought that box and built 2 sabers, if you then go and buy something like a Britannia battle fleet, you still have some plastics left to build another saber, and that unlocks one of the more interesting units in the Crown fleet as well, called the Lord's Hood, which is a squadron made up of 3 sabers that does a lot of work. Heavy firepower, countering opposing spells, giving you extra cards to play with, and that is a very interesting option later down the line. And if you do so, that last cruiser in that Britannia box can then be built as an Albion cruiser. And why do I think that is the most interesting choice? Well, an Albion cruiser has a build with a front torpedo turret and in the back a trident turret to boost all of the different torpedo elements in your force, and that one, much like the Halifax, will act as a force multiplier within your fleet to make all the other units better. And these single cruisers are ideal to do that and increase the punchy power of your big squadrons that you already have with the Sturginium Skies box. Or of course you can always go big and just get a Victory battle fleet set from the get-go. That one comes with a big flagship in the Victory carrier, and you can build 2 sabers out of that one, no problem. You will however not have enough plastic parts to build that Lord's Hood expansion. But again, if you buy an extra frontline squadron, you still can, so that is of course the what I like to call all-in method of doing it. Now if you start off with just that frontline squadron, this is the type of fleet you can instantly get to be up to that standard of 1500 points, which is the type of game that experienced players will do in about 3 hours. You still have your control cruisers, like we said, with the Halifax. You will only be able to field 5 out of 6 of those Orca Hunter submarines, but you'll be able to swap out your Pridanes for Saxon Scout Rotors, because you can only have 1 flying unit in each battle fleet. But those Saber commands allow you to take a second Crown battle fleet, giving you some extra options as well. I personally opted for putting heavy Guardian generators on the rear turrets to really make a Guardian point farm almost, especially if you keep your Halifax shield generator close by. Each of those sabers is going to generate 6 Guardian points, and it's going to increase the toughness, the overall toughness of your force by a lot. And then your Pridane War Rotors are going to be the flyer unit that is allowed in your second battle fleet, bringing the whole total up to a nice little 1480 points unit. The other battle fleets that I mentioned are just to play around with different units, and then you're very much got a very interesting fleet that you can have multiple options with to play around with. And why do I think this is a very cost-effective way to start off with your Crown fleet? Well, that Sturginium Skies half plus that simple battle frontline squadron expansion box already sets you off, and there's a bunch of interesting fleets coming out in the near future, the very near future, to expand this army and to go a whole different route and have multiple builds available to you. You can, for instance, go for something that is released next month, which is the Protecteur Battle Fleet set, which is more Canadians. You start throwing in some SRS options into the mix, which is always fun, and you sort of double down on that submarine theme that you've got going. And again, you get another flagship option, so with your Saber that even allows you to build 3 different fleets, and this one even has a themed battle fleet in the Orbat that you can play around with, so very interesting set. Now, should you have your eye out for this one, this is what I mentioned at the start. I said I recommended making a Halifax shield cruiser out of that spare Canadian that you had, but you'd get 2 extra cruisers in there. So if you had your eye out for a full squadron of Yukon, Newfoundland cruisers or Bonaventure cruisers, you can do so if you just hang back on that Halifax. Also, next month there's an expansion coming for the Sturginium Skies set called the Beyond the Sturginium Skies box, and that brings some very cool options in the form of support squadrons for the British themselves, and that comes with one of the best units, I think, in the whole Crown lineup, being the Excalibur Destroyer class. You also get access to the new plastic base sets, which are going to be the Irish within the Crown Force. There is a word of warning though. The Orbats currently do not allow you to make any new flagships with the plastics included in this expansion box. So, sort of a tricky one. You do get a lot more options, but you'll have a hard time expanding your force. Now, this is all up in the air, of course, because Warcradle can still change the Orbats to allow for a flagship option to be built out of those naval bases. So take this with a pinch of salt. This can be changed, and I'll make sure to mention that in the description below if it has. And another cool thing that was just told a few days ago was that the Avalon Sky Fortress box, the big flying air fleet for the Crown, is going to be released early next year. So Stuart, the designer of this game, mentioned that it'll be here in the first half of 2023, and for me personally, that is by far the most anticipated model in the Crown range. I mean, I started the whole fleet simply because of that model. And there you go. That's what I think is the easiest and best way to get into the Crown faction as a whole. And again, if you want to order that set, make sure that you check out the link below for ccgwinkel.nl, especially if you're in mainland Europe and you've been having a hard time getting your hands on these new releases. Also, if you're interested in that last bit, the expanding the fleet in the future, those pre-orders can be made through that same webshop, so you can basically get everything in one go and save a bit on shipping costs as well. Right, I hope that helped out if you're a new player. If it did, make sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel for more future content. We'll be doing the same for the Imperium Force, seeing how that can be molded into a single large fleet in a cost-effective way. And I hope to see you in the next video. Bye!